You've made a huge mistake. You'll be fired. Don't ever come back to this company.
He shouted at me and left the room. So, I'm getting fired, huh? I've contributed significantly to the company without any major mistakes, but it seems I need to start job hunting. However, 2 days after that, my phone suddenly rings.
Thank goodness, David, you picked up. Can you come back to the office right away?
On arriving at the office, the scene I saw was, my name is David Smith. I have a calm wife and a lively 8-year-old son, making us a family of 3. I work at a subsidiary of a major food manufacturer, handling food orders and dispatches. Managing the inventory for both restaurant supplies and retail products is quite challenging. It's a meticulous job, but I've managed it smoothly without major errors. However, there's one troublesome person at work.
Hey, David, you were supposed to finish this report by today, right?
It was Manager John, my boss, who yelled at me. He's younger than me, in his 40s, but my superior. John, the son of a department head at the parent food manufacturing company, always orders me with arrogance. Moreover, he always thinks he's right, but is quite incompetent at his job. He was appointed as the department head just 2 weeks ago, but seems to have taken a dislike to me, dumping extra work on me every day.
After you finish that, start on this report too. Hurry up.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Take the initiative before your boss has to tell you. You're really clueless.
John threw a stack of papers on my desk and left the room. As I started gathering the scattered papers, I overheard my colleagues whispering. I didn't mean to listen, but being in the same room, I couldn't help it.
John is always so hard on David.
David's work is meticulous and error-free. I wonder why.
But David seems out of it. At his age, still no title? Maybe he's not interested in climbing the corporate ladder.
Yea, with his attitude, it seems hard for him to advance. He just smiles off when John yells at him.
While hearing my colleagues chuckling, I sighed. Well, just say whatever you like. I'm just doing my job my way. While thinking that doing my rule is my way, I continued working on the tasks assigned by John. However, one day, as I was working as usual, my colleague suddenly started panicking. She was sweating and repeatedly apologizing while on the phone. I wondered what was happening, and as she hung up, she came towards me.
David, what's this about?
Me. She handed me a note. It was a complaint from a major client. What's this about?
We ordered 50 regular items for business use and 500 items for home use as samples, but only the 50 business items arrived. We were supposed to distribute the home items to customers at an event in 3 days. They were quite angry.
That can't be right. I've never made such a mistake before, and I was sure I had checked everything. This time, I couldn't understand why this was happening, and I started to panic. I handle orders for 2 types of products, those for business use and those for home use. The large packs for business and the smaller packs for home use have the same name, making them easy to confuse. It's a mistake-prone area, so I always paid extra attention, double-checking everything. But now, a complaint has come in. I immediately switched gears and opened my computer to check the order form. The form showed an order for 50 items for business use. That's odd. I'm certain I ordered 500 items for home use too. I couldn't believe my eyes, and I felt a chill run through me. Then, the next moment, John's loud voice echoed throughout the room.
What a mistake you've made. You useless, incompetent.
But I'm sure I ordered 500 items for home use.
Quiet. The fact is you only ordered the items for business use. Instead of making excuses, do whatever it takes to gather 500 items for home use.
John pushed me back to my desk and stormed out of the room in anger. My colleagues looked on worriedly at the exchange between John and me, but none offered to help. Anyway, I have to somehow gather the items for home use. I immediately returned to my desk and started calling the branches. Sorry for the sudden call. If you have any spare items for home use, could you send them over? Please, I'm begging you. Thank you so much. I'll definitely repay this favor. 241 items left. Only 3 days until the event our client was participating in. Could I possibly get 500 items in time? No time to doubt. Just do whatever I can now. I kept making calls, addressing the situation. I am terribly sorry. Yes, thank you very much. I kept asking them, checking for any available stock. Even if there was just one item, I drove out myself to pick it up. 71 items left. And then, the day before the event, I held the boxes filled with items tightly, said thank you sincerely. Thank you so much for this. I am truly grateful. Finally, I had managed to gather the 500th item. Somehow, I had prepared the amount planned for the event. I immediately went to deliver them to the client, but the person in charge looked down at me with eyes full of anger.
What's going on? We've had a long relationship with your company, but we've never had such an experience. I'm sorry, but we can't trust you anymore. Our business relationship is over.
The client took the products and slammed the door in my face. I slumped for a while, but then slowly made my way back to the office. I had done everything I could. But upon returning, there was John, arms crossed, looking furious, waiting for me.
You made an unbelievable mistake this time. Such repeated errors affect the company's reputation. You'll be fired. Leave now. Don't ever come back to this company.
He yelled and left the room. I trudged back to my desk, head hung low. So, I'm getting fired, huh? My mistake has caused trouble for the company. I've contributed to the company without major mistakes until now, but it seems I need to find a new job. It will be hard at my age, and without having advanced much in my career. What should I tell my wife and son when I get home? Filled with anxiety, I packed up my belongings. After the end of the workday, I apologized to my colleagues and left. I'm sorry for the inconvenience I've caused. Thanks for your hard work. I'll be leaving now. With a heavy heart and apologies, I left the offices. Using the remaining paid leave, that's all I have to do at the company. These last 3 days have been exhausting. I rotated my neck and shoulders, hearing them crack. How should I explain this to my wife and son? Will they be disappointed or give up on me as a failure? No, they'll greet me with a smile as usual. Considering my family's nature, they probably won't blame me. But that thought somehow felt even harder to bear. Hesitantly, I walked towards home, which was just around the corner. I'm home.
Welcome back. Dad.
You're late. Oh, you look pale. Did something happen?
As I held my son, who energetically jumped at me, I just nodded with a smile to my wife's question. Yeah, a little bit. I'll talk about it later.
All right, let's have dinner once you're changed.
I slowly headed to my room. My wife and son, true to my farts, welcomed me with smiles. That made it even harder to figure out what to say. Anyway, I'll talk after dinner. I braced myself and returned to the living room, where my wife and son were waiting. Let's eat.
Let's eat.
So, what happened? You seem down.
Dad, did something happen?
Their concerned voices made my heart pound. But I couldn't keep it hidden forever. Taking a deep breath, I began to speak. I'm sorry, both of you. It looks like I'll be fired from my job. Hearing my words, my wife's eyes widened in shock, speechless. But my son was the one who reacted loudly.
Awesome. Then Dad, you don't have to go to work, right?
Yes, I'll be home for a while.
Yeah. Let's go to the amusement park then. I've been wanting to go.
My son looked at me with a big grin. His unexpected reaction left me just staring back at him. Then my wife began to laugh softly.
That's a great idea. You've been so busy lately. It'll be good for you to relax. I'm happy you'll be at home with us.
Their responses left me speechless. But at the same time, I felt incredibly relieved. Really, they don't blame me for being fired. I can stay at home for a while. I realized we hadn't gone on a trip since my son grew up. I had left all the child care and housework to my wife, so maybe this time together was a good thing. I thought to myself and smiled at them. That's right. Let's go to the amusement park this weekend when school's out.
Yay! You promise, Dad.
I'm looking forward to it.
The living room is filled with my family's happy voices. What a warm dinner table it was. I felt lucky to have such happy moments. Relieved a little, I continued my meal. But the next morning, after taking paid leave, my phone suddenly rang. It was a colleague from the company. What could it be? Did I make another mistake? Feeling a bit anxious, I answered the phone. Hello, this is David.
Thank goodness, David, you're there. I'm sorry to bother you during your vacation, but can you come to the office right away?
Does this mean there's a problem?
I'm sorry, I can't discuss it over the phone, but please come back as soon as you can.
Understood. I'll be there shortly. Urged by my colleague's rushed voice, I quickly got ready. My wife looked at me curiously.
What's up? Did the office call?
Yay, they called me in. I'll go and check. I arrived at the office 40 minutes after the call. Heading to my department, a colleague hurried over to me.
David, thank goodness you're here. Please come with me quickly.
Following my colleague, as he hurriedly ran, I tilted my head in confusion. Why such a rush? What could have happened? Then, as we ran, my colleague began to explain the situation to me. According to him, the next morning after I was told fired, the CEO of the company, with a changed complexion, came to our department, visibly angry.
Why is he not here? Explain this to me.
Are you referring to David? We don't need someone like him.
John, who was there, tried to calm the CEO, but the CEO became even angrier.
What are you saying? Just call David back here.
Then, they contacted me. I was puzzled by my colleague's story, but I was told fired already. My colleague looked as confused as I was. When we arrived, the CEO and a sullen John were waiting.
Oh, David, good to have you back.
But I was told that you'll be fired. The CEO looked surprised, but then relaxed and laughed heartily.
There's no way we'd fire you. Without you, who would manage the contacts for this company?
He showed me his computer screen, displaying the order page for our products. There, I noticed a section marked with a red warning sign. Wait, this isn't right, CEO. Since the day after I took leave, it seems no orders were placed.
Well, of course, you weren't here.
Why wouldn't orders be placed if I'm not here?
Because that's a job only you can do.
The CEO then handed John a note.
John, can you place this order?
Understood.
John took the note and moved to the computer. But as he tried to enter the order, he stopped and looked puzzled.
CEO, what does this say? I can place the order unless it's in English.
Hearing John's words, the CEO began to laugh heartily, slapping his belly.
So, David, can you take the order from the memo John has?
What? No way. CEO, if I couldn't do it, there's no way David can.
Just stand up and hand the memo to David.
John, looking sullen again, reluctantly handed me the memo. As he pushed it into my hand, his glare seemed to say, "There's no way you can do it." I took the memo, sat down at the computer, and checked the order details. Then I began to enter the information as usual. This is a food product from Germany. I'm placing the order now.
Is that in English? It looks like a completely different languages.
Next up, a product from Poland.
What's this product called? I can't read it.
Despite John's interruptions, I kept entering and placing orders one after another. After entering all the products listed in the memo, I looked at the CEO. If there are any more orders, I can do them right away. Isn't it about time for our regular order with France?
Yes, it is. Hey, someone bring any order requests you have. David is back, so we can get them done quickly.
Hearing his words, several employees gathered around, bringing order requests.
David, could you handle this, please?
And this one too. We're in a rush.
As I busily entered the orders, I could hear John grumbling in the background.
Unbelievable. How can that incompetent David manage to place orders?
That's when I realized something. John didn't know about my extensive knowledge of other languages. In fact, I studied various languages during my student days. Being able to read and write in these languages has been incredibly useful in dealing with these countries. After entering all the requested orders, I thoroughly checked the product names and quantities for any errors. All good, no mistakes. Sending now. I felt relieved after completing the orders, but then noticed something strange. What's this? This computer was dedicated to placing orders, and it displayed the order history and the last update after completing the order process. To operate this computer, one had to enter their employee ID, So the name of the employee who last used it was also recorded. According to the record, the last update was on the day I was told fired, but the last updater was listed as John Scott. So that's how it was.
What's up, David?
As everything became clear, I stood up energetically. The ordering mistake the other day wasn't my error. Isn't that right, John?
What are you talking about? Your mistake got you fired.
John retorted, his face turning red. Pointing to the computer screen, I made my case.
You specialize in placing orders, John, and you just said that this incomprehensible languages could only be read by you.
You still won't admit it. Then, let me show you the proof. I quickly printed the screen and showed the printed paper to everyone present. Look here. It says the last updater was John Scott.
Well, that is.
John muttered, flustered, waving his hands, but everyone's eyes were focused on the paper I was holding. The CEO took the paper from me and stared intently at John's name. After a moment, he spoke in a grave tone.
It seems you are the one who should be leaving this company, John.
No, this must be some mistake.
John stammered, his face turning pale as he tried to make excuses. But the CEO, with a stern look, declared to him,
I will be reporting this matter to your father as well. Be prepared for the appropriate disciplinary action.
The president stared intently at John before leaving the scene. John let out a short cry and then collapsed weakly to the floor. Meanwhile, I was surrounded by my colleagues, all of them speaking to me at once.
David, we had no idea you had such a skill. Honestly, we thought you weren't competent at your job. We're truly sorry.
You didn't talk much and seemed a bit odd. Sorry about that.
Oh, don't apologize. You guys hadn't done anything wrong to me. Besides, it looks like I'll still be able to work at this company, so let's keep up the good work together. I replied lightly to my colleagues. Seeing their relieved faces made me feel relaxed and reassured. This way, I proved I hadn't made a mistake and safely returned home. When I told my wife and son that I would be returning to work, they were overjoyed. A few days later, while I was still using my paid leave, my phone rang again. It was the CEO.
Sorry to bother you during your time off. Actually, one of our clients called. They insisted me pass a message to you.
It's okay. What's up?
Well, after the mix-up with the order, the client contacted us, wondering if it really was your mistake. They remembered how diligently you'd handled our dealings in the past, and suspected there might have been a misunderstanding.
Oh, I see. I said, recalling those times. It was heartwarming to know that the client had thought so highly of our long-term relationship. The CEO continued.
I always thought it couldn't have been your mistake, but never imagined John would tamper with it. I'm really sorry about what happened. After a meeting with the higher-ups, we decided to fire him. It's only fair after what he did.
John's father was a senior executive at the parent company, but even that couldn't save him. According to the CEO, John was now job hunting at another company, but rumors of the tampering were making it difficult. After hanging up, I took a deep breath. I could get back to work as usual. With John gone, I was ready to work even harder. Seeing my renewed spirit, my wife said with a smile, "Seems like good things are happening." The next day, we went to the amusement park as promised. My family enjoyed the park, watching our son's happy face.
Dad, Mom, we can reserve priority tickets here.
Really? That's convenient. My son explained the system that allowed us to use attractions preferentially within a designated time. Watching my son, who had grown up so much without me realizing, a warm feeling filled my heart. We enjoyed the amusement park all day. Then, the day to return to work arrived. I go now, I said, leaving the house earlier than usual. The familiar commute seemed to shine differently to me that day. When I arrived at the office, I brushed off my suit and walked in slowly. Good morning.
David, good morning. Sorry to ask right when you arrive, but can you handle this?
A colleague handed me an order for Germany. Sure, leave it to me. And so, my routine at work resumed as before. Oh, you with just a high school diploma? You're getting laid off this month.
I was taken aback by the words of Mr. Richardson, the newly appointed department head at our branch. He pressed on, seeing my surprise.
Didn't you hear? I said folks with just a high school diploma are getting the boot.
I finally gathered myself and retorted, just because you're a manager doesn't mean you're above everyone else in this company. What gives you the right to say that? Facing my logical argument, he coldly responded,
I graduated from a prestigious college and am an elite. I've seen many employees in my time. High school grads tend to be slower learners, lack initiative, and although they have a lot to say, they often slack off. These kinds of people drag down the entire team.
His biased view made my blood boil. How can you say that the stereotype you have for high school grads applies to me? I've been working diligently, and I don't think I'm inferior to those with a college degree. Colleagues who had been eavesdropping began to rally around me.
Tom, Bob here might have only a high school diploma, but he's exceptional.
There's no one as committed and hardworking as Bob.
Please observe Bob's work before making a judgment.
Their support warmed my heart, and I felt grateful for the hard work I had put in at the company. However, no matter how much I or my colleagues argued, Mr. Richardson insisted that high school grads were useless and should resign on their own. I have no intention of quitting. Ignoring Mr. Richardson's notice, I continued my job, but then the harassment began. They intentionally left me out of communications, delayed approvals, and rejected my proposals after belittling them. This made my work environment increasingly hostile. A month later, it's been a short time, but thank you for everything. I handed in my resignation to Mr. Richardson. He smirked as he took it.
Finally made up your mind, huh? Thanks for your hard work.
I nodded and headed to my desk. As I was packing my things, my colleagues surrounded me.
We're gonna miss you, but do well in your new place.
We're rooting for you, Bob.
Encouraged, I smiled back. It's been an honor working with all of you. Looking forward to the day we meet again. Mr. Richardson looked on with annoyance. I held my box and left the department I had been a part of for 10 years. Originally, I had planned to go to college after high school. However, just before graduation, on a snowy day, my father was a delivery man whose car skidded and crashed into a concrete wall after being hit by another vehicle. Although he survived, he was no longer able to drive. My mother was frail and couldn't work outside. The little income they got from home-based jobs was merely pocket change. I also had a younger sister who needed financial support. So, I decided to forego college and find a job. I barely managed to find a job, but thanks to my school counselor, who said, "I'll find a job for you, Bob, don't worry," and introduced me to a good company, I was able to secure my employment. I've been sending New Year's card to that teacher for the past 10 years. The job was in the Chicago branch, far from my family home, but the company offered living facilities with a cafeteria, so I was able to send enough money home. Next 10 years, I worked my tail off for my family to repay the favor to the teacher who helped me find a job, and for the company that accepted a high school grad like me. Whenever I faced challenges, I asked questions, practiced until I got it right, learned from my colleagues, researched clients thoroughly, and gradually built my achievements. I was well liked by my older colleagues and admired by my younger colleagues with college degrees. I felt grateful for my fortunate circumstances. Until Mr. Richardson was appointed, I was told I'm getting fired at the end of the month by the new manager, Richardson. I told to Kathy as we sat across from each other at the bar. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise.
What? Why?
Because I only have a high school diploma. He said having someone like me is a burden to the whole team. Listening to my reply, Kathy exclaimed, "That's ridiculous." I might have never seen her this emotional before. I had proposed to her after dating for 2 years. We were set to get married in 6 months, and now this hits us.
What are you going to do about it?
Kathy asked. I grinned. I'm not just going to let this slide, you know. That day, I was overwhelmed with joy and a bit of anxiety. Standing next to me was the beautiful Kathy in a pristine white wedding dress. Kathy and I were high school classmates. We both wanted to go to the same college and would often study together in the library. Although I had feelings for her, it wasn't the time to be distracted by romance. I decided that if we both got into the same college, I'd confess my feelings. Later on, both of us got into our desired colleges. It felt like a step closer to our dreams. However, an unexpected accident involving my father forced me to start working immediately.
Bob, after all the hard work you put into your studies.
Kathy looked even more upset than me, her shoulders shaking. At graduation, she confessed, "I've always had feelings for you, Bob. Even if we can't go to the same college, I still want to be with you." But I couldn't accept her feelings then. I had to work hard to support my family after only graduating high school. Kathy and I live in different worlds. That was what I thought. 5 years later, I attended a reunion during the summer break. That's when I ran into Kathy again.
Hey Bob, it's been a while.
She had always been pretty in high school, but now she had matured even more beautifully.
You're still working in Chicago, right?
When I replied yes, her face lit up.
Actually, I've been working at a design firm in Chicago. I don't know the city well. Could you show me around?
Despite my initial confusion, I agreed, and we exchanged contact details. From then on, we started hanging out more, visiting tourist spots and trying out local dishes in Chicago. Gradually, my feelings for her reignited. Now, we both had steady jobs, and my younger sister had graduated college and found a job. I felt it was the right time. Kathy, I've always had feelings for you since high school. Would you go out with me? As I confessed with my heart pounding, tears streamed down from Kathy's eyes.
I'm so glad. I never gave up on you, Bob.
Thinking of that time fills me with emotions. Noticing my gaze, Kathy gave a happy smile, making my heart swell even more.
Now, please make your entrance.
A staff member at the venue said. The doors opened wide and spotlights shone down. As we walked arm in arm past the seated guests. Long time no see, Tom. Sitting in the bride's side was manager Richardson, who looked as if he'd seen a ghost and let out a scream. I had your assistants back in the Chicago branch office. My words were followed by Kathy's.
I've often heard about that time from my husband.
Mr. Richardson just stood there, with his mouth agape and looking lost. As I stand in front of the main table, the MC begins to introduce the bride and groom.
The bride and groom have already registered their marriage, and Bob decided to change his surname from Collins to Brown.
The wedding invitation included his former name, but another version without his former name was sent to Mr. Richardson. He probably never dreamed I'd show up as the groom at his company CEO's daughter's wedding. MC starts detailing my background.
Bob, after working at the Chicago branch of Brown Company for 10 years, had transferred to the New York head office and is now actively working as the director of the Human Resources Compliance Department.
Tom's eyes widen in shock. It was the first he'd heard of me working at the headquarters. After the incident with manager Richardson, I discussed the current department situation with my soon-to-be father-in-law, CEO. Tom threatened to fire me and, after learning it was legally impossible, began to make my work difficult. If this continues, it'll not only be hard for me, but the atmosphere of the entire department will worsen. CEO pondered a moment before speaking.
It might be time to bring about a change in the entire company, not just concerning Richardson. Currently, we're thinking about setting up an internal affairs to address issues like power and sexual harassments. Bob, how about working in New York?
Kathy had mentioned that she wanted to quit her current job and start her own business once they got married. This might be the perfect opportunity. On the day I left the Chicago branch office, I submitted my resignation to manager Richardson, but I knew it would be declined by the senior management. I had already been informed of my transfer to the compliance department at the New York headquarters. As this hadn't been officially announced, only the upper management knew.
You finally made up your mind. Thanks for all your hard work.
Hearing this from Mr. Richardson almost made me laugh. But I'm marrying the CEO's daughter. It was amusing how he thought he had successfully pushed me out without knowing this. Others at the Chicago branch learned of my transfer to New York later on. Even after leaving Chicago, colleagues who cared about me reached out. I informed them that I was working in the compliance department at the headquarters and asked them to report any power harassment incidents related to Mr. Richardson. The chief guest and head of the Human Resources Department, Mr. Wilson, delivers a speech.
Although I've just recently started working with CEO, he has initiated various measures to improve the company's work environment since establishing the new department. He is always dedicated, sincere, and passionate. Thanks to CEO's contributions, Brown Company will become a workplace where employees don't have to face any form of harassment.
There was a loud applause from the audience, but only Mr. Richardson was looking down, trembling. Later on, I visited the Chicago branch. I'm Bob from the Human Resources Compliance Department in New York. I'd like to discuss some matters. Is that all right? Mr. Richardson, perhaps expecting this, nodded in agreement. He hadn't only bullied and discriminated against me due to educational differences, but had also shown educational and gender biases towards other employees, engaging in childish acts of harassment. Putting in the effort to get into a prestigious college is commendable and should be appreciated. However, that doesn't give you the right to look down on others who might not have the same educational background. As a director, it's your responsibility to encourage and uplift your subordinates. I cannot overlook the discrimination and harassment you've been committing. Mr. Richardson was demoted and transferred to the customer service center. We hope he learns to empathize with customers' feelings and utilizes this experience for future relationships in the company. I'm home. As I peek into the living room, cheerful laughter fills the air.
Welcome back.
Kathy, gently touching her slightly swollen belly, smiles at me.
I'll get dinner ready in a jiffy.
As she tries to stand up, my mother stops her.
Let Kathy be. She needs to take care of herself. I'll handle it.
You shouldn't push yourself either, Mom.
Watching the playful argument, my wheelchair-bound father chuckles.
The usual banter, huh?
Yep. I agreed with a chuckle. When I visited Kathy's place to ask for her hand in marriage, I was stunned by the sheer size of her mansion. I had heard that Kathy's father ran a business, but I didn't realize they were that wealthy. Ever since Kathy invited friends over in elementary school, she had been labeled as rich by others. By the time she reached middle school, people often hit her up for money, saying, "You have money, so you can spare some." That's why, in high school, she decided not to talk about her home or parents. Seeing her welcoming parents made me even more surprised. Mr. Brown, the CEO. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine my fiancé's father would be the CEO of my company. I had met the CEO once when he visited our branch in Chicago for an inspection.
I've heard good things about you, Bob. You're a diligent and outstanding employee. We have high hopes for you.
I remember feeling incredibly honored when he said that. Being seen favorably as an employee is one thing, but being the fiancé of his daughter is another. With my disabled father and the fact that I only have a high school diploma, would he accept me? Such fears swirled inside me.
I was surprised to learn Kathy's fiancé is one of our employees. But if it's you, Bob, I'm relieved. Please take good care of my daughter.
Mr. and Mrs. Brown welcomed me warmly, and I was so moved I could have cried. Since Kathy is an only child, they expressed their wish for me to be adopted into their family, a common custom. Of course, I'm grateful for that, but I had concerns about my parents. Until now, I had been financially supporting my parents, and my sister practically took care of them. But my sister got married and moved out of state, leaving just my parents living by themselves. Would it be okay if I rushed to my parents' side in case of emergencies? When I asked, CEO made an astonishing suggestion.
We'd like you to be adopted into our family, but we aren't thinking of living together. If you too wish, you can live with your parents.
I thought that might be burdensome for Kathy, but she promptly replied,
I'd love to live with Bob's parents. Their house is close to my parents, so we can visit often.
When I mentioned the idea of living together with my parents, they initially declined, not wanting to interfere with our lives. But Kathy insisted, and now we live together. Now, Kathy is like a beloved daughter to my parents.
I can't believe Bob brought home such a lovely wife, and soon we'll have a grandchild. We're truly blessed.
My mother said, and my father nodded in agreement.
Yeah.
Kathy took my hand and gently placed it on her belly. There have been many hardships in the past, but if they led to our current happiness, then they were all worthwhile. If my life were a movie, I'd want to live in a way that I'd never be ashamed of. As a husband, as a father, as an individual. With these thoughts, I gently caressed Kathy's belly. I'm a 30-year-old single office worker who never had a girlfriend. My only saving grace is my programming skills. Since childhood, I've been an introvert and have difficulty socializing, a trait that's followed me into adulthood. I find it hard to initiate conversations, so my circle of friends consists only of a few from my school days. Not only do I struggle with building new relationships, but I also get nervous and can't respond well when approached, so people at work have gradually stopped talking to me. Over time, I started being labeled as a loner. I'm never invited to lunch or drinking parties, which is lonely, but I also get tired when I am invited, so I guess it's not so bad. Especially, Miss Johnson, the beautiful receptionist, was blatantly looking down on me. Whenever I passed the reception desk, she would always glare at me and I could hear her whispering bad things about me to her colleagues. Even when I thought back, there was no interaction with her to begin with, so I had no clue why she behaved like this. Then one day, a junior colleague from my department was getting married and I had almost no choice but to attend the wedding. I didn't really talk to him much and was wondering why I needed to attend, but I didn't want to offend him, so I reluctantly agreed to go. I wondered if they would really be happy to have someone like me there. With a heavy heart, I left my house. On my way to the wedding venue, unfortunately, I found an old man collapsed on the ground in a park. If it wasn't a crowded place, I would think someone else will help, but there was no one else around. I couldn't just ignore him, so I ran to the old man and called an ambulance. "Are you okay?" "I've called an ambulance," I said, and although he was struggling to breathe, he said, "Thank you." And that put me at ease. The ambulance arrived, and after explaining the situation to the paramedics, I was about to leave, but I was worried about the old man who was alone, so I decided to accompany him to the hospital. When the examination was over at the hospital, I was relieved to find out that the old man's life was not in danger, but of course, I was definitely going to be late for the wedding. When I finally arrived at the wedding, unfortunately, it was a quiet moment, and I received cold looks from my colleagues. Even when we moved to the reception venue, I was feeling awkward the whole time since I had no one to talk to. I had anticipated this, but I couldn't help feeling upset thinking why I had to go through all this even after giving the wedding gift money. As the empty beer bottles began to pile up, some of my colleagues who were red in the face started to put me down on purpose. Especially when the topic of girlfriends or families came up, they'd say things like some guys treat their computers like girlfriends, or maybe he has a virtual girlfriend inside his computer, or man, that's weird, all while glancing my way. Of course, not everyone was saying things like this, but since no one was defending me, it felt like everyone was against me. That day, I went home feeling sad, thinking that I shouldn't have attended the wedding. Several days passed since the wedding incident. After the usual crowded train ride, I walked to the office, dragging my feet through the automatic doors. Normally, I would wait for the elevator while being scared of Miss Johnson, who usually glared at me from the reception, but today was different. For some reason, Miss Johnson hurriedly got up from her seat and ran towards me. I braced myself, thinking she might have a major complaint, but to my surprise, Miss Johnson said, "I'm sorry for the way I've acted. I unfairly disliked you and acted rudely towards you." Miss Johnson, who I had always found intimidating and unapproachable, was speaking to me with a completely different demeanor. Unable to understand the situation, I was dumbfounded. I had never had a chance to look at her face up close before, but seeing Miss Johnson up close, I realized why she was considered out of our league by the male staff, because she was really beautiful. However, I noticed that I was being stared at by people coming into the office because I was facing Miss Johnson, so I tried to leave immediately. But Miss Johnson, who seemed not to care about the stares, invited me to the space next to the reception and began to explain the situation. Apparently, Miss Johnson had once been a victim of an online stalker. Because of that, she had a dislike for me, who was a member of the system development department and somewhat resembled that perpetrator. Even though she knew I was a different person, she couldn't help but feel scared. Also, I had completely forgotten until now, but when I first joined the company, I inadvertently stared at Miss Johnson, who was exceptionally beautiful and stood out. There was no ulterior motive, but I couldn't help but follow beautiful women with my eyes. I hadn't realized that such an innocent act on my part could make someone else feel so uncomfortable. As I was reflecting and apologizing to Miss Johnson, something happened. The company president was walking up behind Miss Johnson, and, for some reason, he was with the old man I had helped the other day. What's more, Miss Johnson, who was standing next to me, stopped the old man and said, "This is Mr. Harper." Stunned and confused, the old man turned to me and said, "I'm grateful for your help the other day. I'm feeling much better, thanks to you. Thank you very much." He bowed his head and then headed to the president's office. Just like with the incident with Miss Johnson earlier, I was left dumbfounded. Then, Miss Johnson told me, "He's my grandfather." It turned out that the old man I had helped was the president of an important client company for us, and Miss Johnson was his granddaughter. According to Miss Johnson, after asking for my contact information in the hospital, the old man learned that I was an employee of the company his granddaughter worked for and seemed to have inquired about me. She initially described me as someone I haven't spoken to much, but he is aloof, interested only in himself and computers, and probably a creepy stalker type. At that, the old man frowned and started telling the story of how I had helped him. He then scolded her for holding biased prejudices, saying, "You shouldn't judge people by their appearance alone. After all, he helped me and even accompanied me to the hospital." Miss Johnson said she deeply reflected upon hearing the old man's words. So that's why she apologized to me with such intensity earlier. I thought it was an odd coincidence, but I was glad that Miss Johnson's misunderstanding had been cleared up. A week later, I came to work as usual, sat at my desk with a cup of coffee, opened the attendance screen, and pressed the button. I always check the company-wide notifications, and as I was going through today's notices as usual, I thought I saw my own name. I felt strange and read it again. For some reason, my name was listed as a member of a new project. I knew they had been recruiting project members internally before, but I hadn't applied and I had heard the competition was fierce, so it should have had nothing to do with me. I sat at my desk, not understanding if it was some kind of mistake. Then the people around me started whispering and glancing at me. I was fed up with being treated this way again, just because of a mistake. Then, the department head appeared on the floor and started the usual morning meeting.
Good morning. Let's start the morning meeting. The major announcement for today is about the new project, I guess. I assume everyone has checked the shared file, but let's just confirm it again for confirmation.
The morning meetings with the department head were always excruciating. I expected that I would be laughed at when they announced there had been a mistake in the list of members. I didn't want to face anyone, so I just kept looking down. But for some reason, when they announced each member's name, mine was called as a matter of course. As expected, the room buzzed when my name was called. After all, in our department, I was the only new member announced, and the two people who were expected to be chosen were not included. The engineers were me and two from another department, totaling 3. Then, someone asked, "Is Mr. Harper in?" The department head said, "Yes, as I read out earlier, he is in." The president told me to definitely include Mr. Harper in the members. "Mr. Harper, do your best." I wondered why the president would, but there was no way to find out. As I was thinking about how many strange things had been happening recently, Miss Johnson approached me as I arrived at the entrance.
Can I talk to you for a bit?
Oh, sure.
About the new project members announced today.
According to what Miss Johnson shared with me, the old man I helped had remembered someone in our company saying, "Harper is diligent and his system development ability is flawless, but he's too introverted and annoying." Po Harper, that's a pity. He had been curious because Harper was an unusual surname and he thought it might be about me. That's why he had asked Miss Johnson in detail about my job level and evaluation within the company. Miss Johnson had said that I was very knowledgeable and excellent in programming in the system development department, but not very good at socializing and wasn't properly evaluated. I was surprised that Miss Johnson knew so much about me, even though she was a receptionist, not HR staff. When I wondered why she knew so much about me, Miss Johnson continued, "I have a friend who works in human resources. They told me." When she told the old man about it, he said, "It's too bad he's not appreciated even though he's excellent. Communication skills are necessary for sales, but engineers should be properly evaluated in their specialized fields. We should find a way to let Mr. Harper demonstrate his abilities. Maybe we should propose to include him in the next project." I was always labeled as a loner by everyone, always drawing the short straw and thinking that I would continue to live a dark and solitary life. But then, out of the blue, a chance presented itself. Feeling a surge of determination not to waste her grandfather's goodwill, I am fully committed to ensuring the success of the project. In the past, I would have been worried about not making a mistake or causing any trouble. However, now I feel a stronger motivation that I can't let down the trust and expectations placed in me by her grandfather. And it wasn't just being chosen for the new project team. It seems that Miss Johnson spread the word about my helping her grandfather, and soon my story was making rounds in the company. Before, I wouldn't even get invited to social gatherings, but now I'm increasingly being asked, "How about joining us for a drink, Mr. Harper?" I was socially awkward, but the simple fact that I was being invited made me happy, and I started showing up at these social gatherings from time to time. Before joining the new project, I was deeply concerned about my lack of social skills, but once I started, the job was so rewarding that I didn't worry about such things, and I became happier and more fulfilled each day. I feel like I am meeting the expectations of everyone, including the CEO, by showcasing my excellent programming skills, which I was always good at. And there is not a single person among these members who would mock me or try to ostracize me. Everyone is passionately focused on their jobs, all for the success of the project. It seems that her grandfather, who knew about my trouble with conversation despite being competent at work, advised the CEO on how to make the most of his employees. In this project team, embracing individual personalities has also become one of the themes. Thanks to the project, I am now recognized as one of the top engineers in the company, and no one looks down on me anymore. Moreover, I can even have friendly conversations with Miss Johnson now. My entire life has changed in an unbelievable way because I helped an old man. I plan to continue working hard so that I can be of use to everyone, and if possible, I hope to grow even closer to Miss Johnson.
Don't quit your job at the bank. It's such a waste. But maybe it's better for a sloppy guy like you to live in the countryside and stretch out, LOL.
At the junior high school reunion, Robert, who used to work at the same bank as me, mocked me for switching to a farming job. The reason I moved to the countryside where my maternal grandfather lives was because I got fed up with living in the city due to being framed by Robert. But even though it was your fault, I didn't hold a grudge against Robert. In my new home, I found something precious, something more important than anything else. I am John Smith. I excelled in studies from a young age. I always scored perfect and never below 90. My parents seemed extremely proud of me, and I was proud of myself for being like that. However, I had a problem. I attended an escalator-style private school from elementary to high school, always ranking first, and then I went to a prestigious university through the same escalator system. And even in university, I continued to achieve excellent grades. I was hired by a major New York bank without experiencing any setbacks. However, at New York Bank, where elites gathered, my boasting efficiency went unnoticed. And I had a weakness. I was not good at communicating with others. Even though I was good at studying, communication was essential in the workplace, so the part of me that had been neglected became apparent, and I fell behind my colleagues.
Hey, John.
Yes, I was stopped by one of my female colleagues. I knew the reason why I was stopped. It was because of the blunder I made in the window service earlier.
John, aren't you from a good background and quite smart, yet you can't handle window service?
I'm sorry.
Did you cheat at school?
No, well.
Why is someone like this working with him, who does a good job?
A man named Robert, who had been in the same class as me since elementary school and had always been second in the class following me, was my colleague at the bank. He had lower academic background than me, but was handsome and had excellent communication skills.
Because Robert is here, I'm depositing money at this bank.
When an elderly lady came to the counter and found out that Robert was her account manager, she said happily and told him that. By the way, when I tried to assist this lady, she said, "Oh, I forgot something at home, so I'll go back," and left.
It's nice of you to say that. Mrs. Bates, it looks like it's going to rain today, so be careful on your way home.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
She had a delighted expression on her face. Robert, is he a smooth talker? He can naturally say words of concern to others. Well, this guy has never said anything like that to me in our lifelong friendship.
Oh, it's John. You messed up the window service again.
Robert, are you sure you don't have a split personality?
I'm better at my job than you, so don't be jealous.
Well, Robert has quite a different personality behind the scenes like this. And every time I fail at work, he comes and teases me like this, which is annoying. I thought I could work glamorously for a major company during my student days and before joining the workforce. But reality was different. Even though I tried my best to use my weak communication skills and make an effort, I would fail and be ridiculed by the office lady and my colleagues. I'm not good at the current environment where I have to worry about evaluations in such a narrow world. One day, Robert and I were summoned by the branch manager.
I might get promoted, and you might get fired.
I was fine with that feeling. I was starting to find it a bit tough to continue working in this bank and in the city. However, the reason the branch manager called us was the same for both of us. After leaving the branch manager's office, Robert suddenly showed his anger.
Besides me, but why the hell are you also being transferred to the sales department?
It's a decision by the big shot, so we have no choice but to follow.
Dan.
For some reason, both of us were transferred to the sales department. Speaking of the sales department, it's a department for loan sales with quotas. It's hard work, but it's also a prestigious department. As a loan officer, The clients are not ordinary citizens, but business owners. I thought that I could somehow make it by using my thinking skills rather than communication. I saw this as a chance given to me by the big shot. It's a bit complicated for Robert to be transferred with me, but having competition is good. I was determined to show them all that I would definitely make a comeback, and with that determination, Robert and I were transferred to the sales department.
I must say, John, you're reliable because you're sharp.
Oh, no, I still have a long way to go.
Please continue to help us.
Yes, thank you very much. And as planned, my problem-solving skills spoke louder than my communication skills. I smoothly handled my work and began to secure contracts beyond the quotas. Of course, it was because the job suited me, and I actively sought guidance from my seniors to improve my weak communication skills. I thought that just because I was bad at it, I shouldn't let communication be a hindrance, so I made an effort. And then, as my seniors watched me, they started praising me, saying, "John, you seem to have become brighter. It's great." However, city life still wasn't suitable for me. A few months after the transfer, I was summoned by a serious-looking Robert. "What's wrong? You didn't come here to make sarcastic remarks, did you?"
John, please help me.
Huh?
I can meet the quota. I can cause trouble just because of me. Can you secretly assign me some cases?
I didn't think Robert's serious expression was a lie, and I thought it was also a form of communication, so I secretly assigned him some cases, and I would come to regret it. At the end of the month, our performance was announced at a meeting, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Robert's performance was actually better than mine, even though he had been lamenting about not meeting the quota. Robert had actually secured more cases than I did.
John should learn from Robert.
Yes. Looking at me, who was being scolded by our boss, Robert had a smirk on his face. "Aw, my life is just like this after all. It's a life where I'm only used by others for their own benefit." With that thought, my emotions faded away. Everything became burdensome, hypocritical, and empty. I felt like I had reached my limit, and before I knew it, I had submitted my resignation to New York Bank. I quit a major bank. My parents were bewildered by my bizarre behavior. I broke up with my girlfriend, whom I was about to marry. And I became a shut-in, staying in my room all day. Worried about my condition, my mother forcibly took me to a mental health clinic, where I was diagnosed with mild depression. They told me that at this level, I might recover by taking a closer look at myself slowly. So, for some reason, I decided to reevaluate my life and went to my grandparents' house. My grandparents' house was quite rural, and my grandfather grew grapes and vegetables. My grandmother had passed away a long time ago, so my grandfather lived alone, so I started helping with the farming. I was good at studying, but I wasn't very strong physically. At first, my grandfather laughed and said, "You don't have as much stamina as I do." If you compare the physical strength of a farmer grandpa and that of a city businessman, the farmer grandpa definitely has more.
John, how about taking a little break?
Oh, finally, a break.
You're so lazy even though you're young.
While laughing, my grandfather brewed some tea for us.
I don't know the details of why you came here, but life is long. You can think things through again from here.
The tea my grandfather brewed had a slightly bitter taste. Coming here was a good decision. Working on farming with a life senior was a refreshing change of pace. Since then, I woke up early in the morning and helped with growing grapes and vegetables on the vast property. I used to be afraid of bugs, and in the beginning, I would make a fuss over finding just one caterpillar. But now, I empathized with their struggle to survive, and my resistance disappeared. The farmland on the expansive property, which my grandfather managed by himself, was so large that I often wondered how he did it. When I asked my grandfather about it, he told me that he usually hired a few people from the elderly labor agency. However, recently, he had reduced the number of workers because I was here to help.
You know, John, I hate this world where farming is considered at the bottom. Don't you think it's strange that they call what we do at the bottom, even though we're able to feed ourselves with the crops we grow?
Yeah, you're right, Grandpa. I used to think farming was nothing, but now I take pride in it. I had come to enjoy working in nature. The feeling I couldn't have imagined during my days in the city wearing a suit. Now, I was striving to produce better crops with my grandfather and the people from the agency struggling together. This way of life continued for about 3 years. One day, as I was driving along a country road in my car, I saw a woman walking barefoot while singing a cheerful song, even though she was wearing a suit. I became suspicious, or rather worried, and cautiously called out to her from the car. Are you okay?
Yes, thank you. I think my high heels broke from walking for a long time, or maybe it's because of the rough country road. I tripped and fell. My shoes got swept away in the ditch.
I glanced at the ditch next to her, and sure enough, her black pumps were being carried away by the water. But what concerned me more than the shoes was her feet. They were covered in blood and looked very red. I'm not living alone. I live with my grandfather, so please don't worry, and invited her to my grandfather's house. My grandfather happened to be at home, and he was bustling around, saying, "First, let's treat your feet," as he prepared tea, or rather, first aid for her.
Ouch, 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 ouch.
While I was treating her injured feet, she screamed in pain. With so much blood, it must be painful. Where did you come from?
New York. I got tired of wearing a suit, high heels, quotas, office politics, and all that, so I changed trains on my way to work and ended up here.
She said this while showing a tired smile.
I just gave up and thought, I don't care anymore.
For some reason, I felt like I was looking at my past self. I understand because I went through the same thing.
Really?
Yeah, I used to work at a bank in New York too, but I got exhausted, quit the company, and when I went to the hospital, they said I had mild depression. I came here because I wanted to change myself.
You're the same as me, huh?
She smiled. It was a smile I felt like I had seen somewhere before.
Hey, is depression okay?
I've been doing farming here for 3 years, and I've calmed down a lot. I hardly take any medication now.
Farming is amazing.
She said this and found a photo in the living room. It was a picture from my student days. With her newly treated, painful feet, She unsteadily stood up and picked up the photo.
No way.
Huh, what's wrong?
Hey, aren't you John Smith? I'm Mia Wilson. Do you remember?
What could it be, Mia? She was a childhood friend I had been close to since I was little, and she had always been famous for her beauty. She suddenly transferred to another school during junior high. I had a crush on her back then. It seemed that she hadn't formed a bad impression of me, and she was happy to reunite. I couldn't believe I was meeting my first love again in this way. It felt like fate. From that day on, Mia moved into my grandfather's house, and from the next day, we worked on farming together while taking care of her injured foot. Surprisingly, Mia was good with bugs despite being a woman. She would even say things like, "Oh, how cute," when she saw a caterpillar. On that day, Mia and I stood in the kitchen together, chatting as we made a salad with cucumbers and tomatoes we had harvested and served my grandfather with eggplants simmered in a dish.
Delicious. Well, Mia, how about becoming John's wife?
Grandpa.
That might be a good idea. John has always been a good guy, and farming is fun. Think about it, Mia.
Wait, Mia. Grandpa burst into laughing. We lived together like this, joking around, for 2 years. Life with her made me feel alive and brought joy. My depression was completely gone.
Yeah, I've figured out what I need to do.
Saying that, she returned to New York. About a month later, I received a letter from my mother. A letter in this day and age. I was surprised. Inside was a letter from my mother saying, "You seem to be doing well," and an invitation to a high school reunion. A class reunion, her.
John, are you going?
Maybe I should.
You'll meet old friends after a long time. You should go.
And so, I decided to attend the high school reunion. There was another reason I wanted to go to New York, but I had forgotten about it.
Oh, it's you, John. It's been about 5 years, right? You're still alive.
Come to think of it, he was also a classmate from back then. Robert.
What are you up to these days?
He can't hide that smirk on his face. He didn't even apologize for what he did to me, pushing me into depression, and now he's laughing at my profession. Well, I'm doing farming with my grandpa now.
Farming? No way. The top student in our class is a farmer now. That's hilarious.
Making fun of someone's profession without even apologizing for what he did. How rude.
Quitting the bank job is such a waste, but someone like you, who's a bit of a mess, might be better off living a laid-back life in the countryside.
My classmates were essentially all elites. Everyone was siding with Robert and mocking me. They were all mocking me, probably enjoying my downfall after being the top student in school. Robert chimed in.
What are you doing in your 20s without building a career?
I mean, living a peaceful life in the countryside and getting a wife might not be a bad idea. I was just speaking my mind. However, the others were already treating me like a clown.
Marriage? Do you even have a girlfriend?
Not right now.
No way, just give up and embrace the single life.
Farmers like you aren't cut out for marriage, so give it up.
Well, I thought the city was suffocating, and then a girl arrived late and raised her voice unexpectedly.
Getting married is easy for you, John. I'm here, after all.
Mia,
It seems like things are getting lively. With me here, John will become a hero.
Mia transferred out of our middle school without graduating, but it seemed like she had received an invitation after all. Or rather, what does she mean by hero?
I didn't expect to see you, Mia. You're still beautiful even as an adult.
Mia's beauty was enchanting, and Robert and the others were excited by her appearance. However, Robert seemed bothered by Mia's words.
Wait a minute. Were John and you really that close? Wait, could it be?
I'm John's fiancée.
He was quite surprised to hear that. Well, even I hadn't heard about it. I hoped it would turn out that way. Then, the guys who had been mocking me started to approach Mia. Robert, in particular, used a boastful and dirty approach, but Mia just laughed it off.
Working at a bank isn't a big deal. John's annual income is $2 million.
No way. 2 million from farming. That's impossible.
But Mia isn't lying. They looked quite surprised. As the venue began to buzz with uncertainty about whether the story was true or not, Mia cleared her throat and started explaining about our farming.
John is being recognized in the industry as a pioneer of smart farming.
I pondered how I could make the best use of my grandfather's extensive farmland. Using my natural intelligence, I came up with ideas like using drones for pesticide spraying. As a pioneer, I revitalized and utilized the local barren lands in my grandfather's hometown. But reaching $2 million in income was thanks to Mia. Originally, Mia worked as a researcher at a pharmaceutical company. Leveraging her skills from that time, she improved fertilizers and, with her naturally research-driven personality, achieved great success in breeding. That breeding achievement was quite something.
What kind of breed is it? I bet it's something I've never heard of.
Do you know a certain type of grapes called Shine Muscat?
It actually became quite famous. Don't you know, Robert?
At that moment, Robert's face turned bright red with embarrassment and shame.
Don't make fun of me.
Robert, who had thought less of me, was jealous of my success and left with a bright red face. Afterward, classmates who had heard the story gathered around us, creating a crowd. I couldn't stand them. They were the ones who had mocked me earlier. I felt disgusted. Mia also wore a puzzled expression, so we decided to leave first. As expected, the atmosphere in New York didn't suit us. While walking, I asked Mia what she had been doing all this time. Mia began to speak as she looked up at the evening sky.
When I moved to the countryside, I was mentally exhausted, so I cut off contact with acquaintances.
Even your parents?
Yeah, so I went to apologize. I said sorry for worrying them. They were both exasperated, but they forgave me.
I see. That's great.
Also, I told them that I want to marry you.
Mia's cheeks were faintly blushing. That's great. So, this won't go to waste, huh? The reason I decided to go back to New York was to buy an engagement ring for Mia.
We were thinking the same thing.
It seems like it. When I presented the ring, Mia extended her left hand. And this way, Mia and I started walking through life together. After getting married, about a year later, it wasn't just the two of us anymore. We had another member in our family. And then, We were blessed with 4 more children, making us a family of 5. Our kids absolutely loved grapes. When the season came, they would rush to the grape vineyard, shouting, "All you can eat." Well, it wasn't exactly all you can eat, but you get the idea. But it was delightful when they all frowned and protested in unison when we served tomatoes, eggplants, or bell peppers at the dinner table, saying, "No way, I hate it, I won't eat it." As they grew older, they began to appreciate the farming, and little by little, their pickiness diminished, or so it seemed. There are many challenges in life. We've experienced struggles and great successes. Raising children and farming are both tough, but with Mia, we can overcome anything. We're kindred spirits, outcasts from society. Yet, as long as we're together, we can conquer any difficulties. We firmly believe that.
Hey Johnson, wearing the same old clothes again? Living broke with your grandma really suits you, haha.
As per usual, I was being harassed by my classmate, Bob. Bob always bragged about his dad working for a top tire company. He loudly boasted about his weekend trips to theme parks and movie theaters, as well as family trips abroad during summer vacations, making sure everyone heard him. Most classmates probably disliked Bob internally. However, he was tall and muscular for a kid, like a boss of the class, so no one dared to defy him. He especially targeted me, living in poverty with my grandmother, and harassed me almost daily. If my mom and dad were still alive, I wouldn't have to feel this miserable. I clenched my fist, shaking in anger. At 11, I lost my parents in an earthquake. It was during spring break, and I happened to be staying at my grandma's place. I was shocked by the footage on the TV, and when I saw my parents' names among the casualties, I was stunned. After the quake, when Grandma and I returned to our hometown, the entire area was devastated. Homes, facilities, and factories were destroyed and washed away. Where our house once stood, rubble and debris from elsewhere were piled up. The tsunami didn't just take my parents and home. It washed away all our memories. I was taken in by my grandma amidst this unexpected tragedy, unsure where to direct my anger. Grandpa had already passed away, and Grandma lived on a meager pension. With little to no financial flexibility, Grandma struggled to raise me. Previously, she was content with a simple meal, but now with me growing and eating more, expenses increased. Costs of school items like backpacks, gym clothes, and swimsuits, not to mention school lunches and field trip fees. Despite conserving our savings as much as possible, we barely managed to get by. As I reached middle school, preparing for college expenses, Grandma started working at a nearby convenience store. Grandma married Grandpa right after graduating and hadn't worked before. Though she never complained to me, I sometimes caught a glimpse of her weary face, showing her struggles with the job. Despite the hardship, she never just spoiled me. She taught me good manners and discipline, emphasizing never to inconvenience others. I didn't want to burden her, so I never told her about the bullying. One day, I was heading to the store where Grandma worked. It was to pick up expired lunch boxes. The store, run by a franchise owner, typically discards items past their sell-by date. But considering Grandma's situation, the owner let us have the bread and lunch boxes. So on days when Grandma worked late, I'd pick up my share right after school. before the evening rush. It had been a year and a half since Grandma started working there. Lately, she'd been saying the job's become easier, and she enjoys working with her friendly manager and colleagues. But considering her age, it must still be tough. I wanted to ease her burden as soon as I could. As I entered the store, I unfortunately spotted Bob and his dad. I wanted to turn back, but Bob caught sight of me. I'll get the lunchbox after Bob and his dad leave. That was my plan, but it wasn't just Bob who noticed me.
John, here's your lunchbox. It just went past its sell-by date a couple of hours ago. Get home and eat it fast.
As Grandma handed me the lunchbox, I hung my head in shame. I felt my face burn and my stomach churned. Even with my head down, I sensed Bob smirking and approaching me.
You eat expired lunchboxes? Just what I expected from someone as po as you are.
Grandma gasped upon hearing Bob. She was unaware that Bob was my classmate or that he was bullying me. It was distressing to think that this incident would reveal everything to Grandma. Noticing our interaction, Bob's dad, who was browsing the aisles, started walking towards us.
Dad, this guy is in my class, and he's eating expired lunchboxes.
I hoped that he would reprimand his ill-mannered son, but as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Hey, you can't just take lunchboxes without permission. Can't believe one of Bob's classmates would steal.
He glared accusingly at me and Grandma. Grandma looked away, tears forming in her eyes. Just then, a young female cashier intervened.
This isn't being taken without permission. The manager, understanding Johnson's family situation, allowed them to take 2 discarded lunches. All the staff members are aware of this.
She stood protectively in front of me and Grandma, explaining firmly. However, even after it was proven that the lunches were rightfully given, Bob's father did not apologize.
Still, eating expired lunches. It's unbelievable. Being po sure is pathetic.
He smirked, looking down on us with disdain. I felt a burning anger, my hands trembling as I held the lunch.
How could you say something like that? You better apologize.
The female cashier raised her voice, but Bob's father yelled back at her.
Shut up. Who do you think you are? Just a part-time cashier at a convenience store, talking back to me?
Seeing the situation escalating, the cashier looked Bob's father straight in the eye.
Let me ask you the same question. Are you sure you want to be talking to me like that?
She then added quietly.
You work for Foster Industries, right? I'll be reporting your behavior today to the CEO, who happens to be my father. Be prepared.
Immediately, Bob's father paled.
You're the CEO's daughter.
He was visibly shaken. I deeply apologize. Please, let's keep this matter private. It's unrelated to work, he said, bowing deeply. A stark contrast to his arrogant demeanor earlier. Bob seemed confused about what was happening.
I once accompanied a company trip and saw how you acted. You were submissive to my father and your superiors, but very arrogant to your subordinates. I'm not an employee and didn't want to get involved, but I now realize that having someone like you in the company is an issue.
Hearing her words, Bob's father quickly realized that apologizing would be futile. He motioned for Bob to follow him, and they hurriedly left the convenience store.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Grandma bowed to Susan, and I quickly followed suit in thanking her.
It's all right. Oh, a customer has arrived. I need to get back to the counter.
She noticed a customer entering and went back to work. I felt it would be rude to disturb during the store's busy hours, so I called out to Grandma and left. That evening, Grandma brought Susan home.
You must have felt terrible, right? I'm sorry.
Looking guilty, Susan apologized. No, it's not your fault at all. Thank you for helping us, I replied, and she gave a warm smile.
Johnson is my savior. I just couldn't stay silent.
Susan explained that after college, she was living comfortably, helping with housework as told by her mother. However, wanting some real-world experience, she took a part-time job at the convenience store. Being pampered all her life, she made many mistakes at work, causing trouble for the manager and co-workers. That's when Grandma stepped in and helped her, teaching her not just about the job but also about good manners and etiquette. She said, "Susan is like another grandchild to me," to which Susan nodded in agreement. I felt a warm and fuzzy feeling inside as I listened to the story. Later on, Bob and his family moved away due to his father's job transfer. I learned from Susan that it was a demotion and he was sent to a remote branch.
Damn it, this is all your fault.
Bob shouted at me, but his words didn't bother me at all. With the way he acted, it was clear that Bob would have trouble making friends at his new school. With him gone, the class environment became much brighter. A change of seats in class brought me some new friends, and school became much more enjoyable. I was uncertain about my future after graduation, but with Grandma's encouragement, I decided to pursue college. I studied hard and was accepted into my top choice school. But just as I was about to graduate from high school, a dark cloud loomed over my life. Grandma fell ill and couldn't work anymore. Though her life was not in danger, she would be out of work for a while, which meant no income and mounting medical bills. I decided to forgo college and start working to support us. I originally wanted to work so I could give my grandma a break. It just happened sooner than expected. Right around that time, Susan came to visit my grandma in the hospital. Susan had already quit her part-time job at the convenience store and was working at her father's company. She heard about my grandma's hospitalization from a former co-worker at the store and made the effort to visit. Not only did Susan bring a gift for my grandma, she also gave me a present to celebrate my college acceptance. It looked like a high-quality, black leather pencil case from a renowned brand. Thank you so much. But I'm not planning to go to college. When I replied like that, my grandma was taken aback.
John, I'm so sorry. Because I had to be hospitalized. I'm sorry I can't support you for your future.
The savings my grandma had set aside for my college were spent on hospital bills, treatments, and medications. It's okay. I didn't really want to go to college. I'll work hard now, even for the both of us, I said with a smile, not wanting my grandma to feel guilty. Then, Susan turned to me.
John, I'll cover your college tuition.
Shocked by the sudden offer, I exclaimed, "What?"
In return, I want you to work with me after you graduate. Then, you won't have to repay the tuition.
Susan is currently working with her father, but she's considering starting her own business. As I hesitated and thought of declining, she said, "Consider this as a scholarship from me. I want to invest in a young person with a bright future. If you perform well in the future, it's a profitable investment for the company. What do you say?" Susan's passionate persuasion brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't a lie when I said I wanted to work right after high school to repay my grandma's kindness. Yet, deep down, I still had an unyielding desire to pursue a college education, just like everyone else. Okay, I'll study hard in college and do my best to be useful. Thank you so much for this opportunity," I said, tears streaming down my face as I bowed deeply.
Thank you so much, Susan.
My grandma, too, was tearful as she repeatedly thanked Susan. I vowed to work hard to repay the kindness Susan, who had saved both my grandma and I twice, had shown us.